It's Monday, March 9th, 7 PM, and we're going to go ahead and commence tonight's planning board meeting. And before we formally begin, Board Member Hom, can you lead us in Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you.
Happy to. Pledge allegiance.
And to the republic nation under God, indivisible, with justice for all.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and start with roll call.
Good evening. Board Member Hom,
Here.
Board Member Ruiz,
Here.
Board Member Saheba,
Present.
and President Cisneros.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum with 3 absences.
Okay, great. Moving on, do we have any agenda changes either from staff? Oh, and we just have an adjustment to the roll call. I don't know if we can update that. Hi, we're just getting started.
So Board Member Wang is joining us.
Okay, great.
Hi, I'm here.
Present, yes. Great. All right, moving on now to agenda changes. Anything from staff or board? Seeing nothing. Moving on to non-agenda public comments. Anyone virtually, I guess, since no one's here physically, can comment on something that's not on the agenda for 3 minutes. Do we have anyone?
If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. It does not appear that there are any speakers.
Okay, great. And moving on to consent calendar. So we have the draft meeting minutes for February 23rd, and we also have various development agreements for B, C, D. Okay, so maybe we should do them one by one. If we have, I think Board Member Hom, you were absent for the last board. Well, we don't have a quorum then, right? For
Oh,
We do.
we do now.
4.
okay. All right, so do we have any comments or a motion for agenda item consent calendar 4A?
I move to approve consent calendar 4A.
Okay, and do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And I'll abstain.
And 1 abstention. Okay, great. Next, we have, I guess we could do these one by one. 4B, the Del Monte Development Agreement. Any, yes,
Yeah, you have to ask for public comment.
Oh, for
on
each one?
4A.
oh, okay.
in
Any public
case-
comment on 4A? Seeing none? Okay. And then we'll close that and go on, thank you, to 4B, the Del Monte Agreement. Any comments or questions? If not, do we have a motion?
Probably, you want to take any public comments?
Any public comments for 4B?
Through the chair, you can ask for public comments on all 3 of them at once since it's a
The
consent
4B,
item.
4C, and 4D?
Correct.
Okay, we'll do that. That sounds good. Do we, if no comments, we have a motion for 4B?
I move approval of these annual reports for all 3 items.
All 3, 4B and C and D? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
can we do that?
Yeah.
Or should we?
Unless anyone has comments, right?
That's fine. And are there any recusals on any of these?
Mm.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Oh, the Del
Del
Monte,
Monte.
yeah,
Okay,
that's
then we-
right.
Then we probably should take them one by
Do
one.
one by
Yeah.
one.
Okay, going back to just item 4B then.
Okay, then
We have a
I'll
motion.
move approval for B.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 1
One abstention.
Okay, great, that passes. Item 4C, the Alameda Point Site A,
I'll move again.
move, and do we have a second?
President Cisneros?
Yes.
I have questions
Yes.
on the. annual
Oh, you have a
report.
question on
Yeah,
item
question on
4C?
the- That's okay.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can still move it. I just have questions.
Yeah. Let's go ahead.
Question for staff concerning, thank you for the Site A Development Agreement update. In review, what's going to happen with Block 11? I notice it's been vacant for a while. My understanding is there's an extension on the DDA, but can you elaborate? I don't recall seeing much detail on the report. Maybe I've missed it.
Yes, each of these projects is in force majeure, economic force majeure, meaning their requirements are told. And so there is sort of no progress pending obtaining more financing and better economic conditions.
But was it part of the report? I don't recall seeing it.
It basically applies to all of
All
the
the
rest of
develop-
Site
okay.
A.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the question. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, and we have 2 absences. Moving on to 4D, which is the Boat Works Development Agreement.
I'll go ahead and move that one.
You'll move that one? Okay, any questions or comments? If not, do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? And 2 absences. Okay, and with that, I'll open it up for public comment. Anyone virtually that would like to make any comments?
Through the chair, you had already asked for public comments on the consent calendar, so you don't need to
Oh.
ask for it again.
Oh, okay. Great.
Of course, if you'd like, you can always indicate more comment.
Okay, great. So with that, we're going to go ahead and close agenda item 4, which is the consent calendar. Great. Moving on to the regular agenda item, which is to review the Alameda 2040 General Plan and Housing Element. And just quick clarification, I see there's other reports listed here, but we already approved those at the last planning board meeting. So this is just for the Housing Element and General Plan. So do we have a presentation?
We do. Tristan Swear will be making the presentation tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Nice, okay. Good evening, esteemed chair, board members. Thank you very much for your time this evening. The item before you is, as previously noted, a returning item. Specifically, it's the review of the general plan and housing element annual progress reports. So this is an item that had come before the board at your previous meeting and is an update to the city's progress on its housing goals and general plan programs during the calendar year 2025. I think I'm going to offer just a kind of brief overview before we dive into some of the information here. So the housing element is on an 8-year cycle that the city is required to report on annually. It identifies a number of opportunity sites for which the city is obligated to zone sufficient density for its RHNA, that's our Regional Housing Needs Allocation. Essentially the number of total housing units needed to be produced over that 8-year period to address the state's housing crisis. That being said, there is no penalty for failing to achieve that number. Because of sort of larger macroeconomic conditions, we have seen a downturn in the overall number of housing units developed in the past calendar year. Each year out of that 8-year cycle, we produce this annual progress report. And every year, the state finds more granular data to ask about. So we provide not just units, total number of housing units issued in that calendar year, but also planning entitlements applied for, building permits applied for, building permits finalized. And it creates a really clear picture of sort of the direction that the city is taking with its housing production and gives us a good idea of sort of what programs and policies are affecting the most change. So continuing here, just a little bit of an update on specific projects. So there are a number of sort of larger housing developments ongoing right now in the city. I'm just going to run through them very quickly, but if any board members are interested in hearing a little bit more about them, certainly we can dig in. So of course, there's the North Housing Project, very exciting development. A number of the units there receive certificates of occupancy. So that means the units are constructed, they've been inspected, and are now finalized, ready to occupy. So that's sort of the last step in the process. So those are specifically units for 30% AMI and 40% AMI. And so having a number of those lower income units is a pretty good step in the right direction. Reshape refers to a large multi-phase project that involves removal of some existing housing and creation of some new large supportive housing. So the entitlements for that project were approved in 2025. Pretty significant progress towards that. West Midway, sort of in conjunction with the Reshape project, also submitted applications for planning entitlements. So we are working through those. Alameda Marina Townhomes, this is phase 2 of the Alameda Marina site on the North Shore. The townhomes saw significant progress in 2025 with a number of residential buildings finalized. We're anticipating continued progress on that project in the coming year, so we'll see more of those townhomes constructed in 2026. Grand and Clement is, you may have heard of it referred to by a couple of different names. Skyline is sort of the name the developer has given it. It's a project that has had a few buildings, I think 3 buildings are now constructed. A number of those units have been finalized, meaning they're ready to occupy. And likewise, their progress in 2026 is looking to sort of continue. The Mariner Square Loop housing development, as I'm sure you're aware, received its planning entitlements last year and is moving forward. And of course, we also have a few various updates to our zoning ordinance that we pursued in the last year that were sort of targeted at furthering housing goals, including updates to our inclusionary housing, which we're still working on with council. That'll also be coming back to you folks. We did update our universal design ordinance to address some townhomes issues, you may recall. And we're working on our short-term rental ordinance. So looking forward to bringing that before this board. So that's just some update on specific projects that had meaningful progress in 2025. In addition to reporting on specific housing projects, we also report on programs that are identified in our housing element. There are 22 of them. Some are really quite specific and involve, for example, rebates from our municipal power or assistance given to first-time home buyers for down payment assistance. Some are more broad and involve things like annually reviewing our ADU production or bringing these reports to the board, right? So there's various levels of progress. I try to give a kind of broad overview of the progress, not just in the past year, but also sort of more broadly in the planning cycle, which started in 2023. So hopefully that was sufficient for everybody to understand kind of the direction that these programs are going in. But again, happy to drill down on any particular number of these if there are questions on them. I'm not going to take the time to go through every one of these programs here tonight, but certainly if there are questions, happy to help elucidate anything that may be unclear. And then, you know, one of the things I wanted to kind of drill down on as far as the actual RHNA numbers and why they may look the way they do. I think it was probably, at least for me, it was somewhat alarming to see that the number of issued permits in 2025 had so precipitously declined from the previous year. So if you look at the bottommost row of the table that I have up here, it shows the total building permits rather than broken up by income category, which is what you see in the rows above that. And you'll see that in 2024, we issued almost 250 building permits, or rather permits for 243 units, to be more specific. That number has decreased significantly to 65 this year, and as I think it was pointed out, a much greater proportion of those this year were ADUs, rather than maybe a more significant multifamily attached structure. It's worth noting that without seeing the larger context of the planning cycle, these numbers might seem a little bit misleading. So to clarify, those 243 units that were issued permits in 2024 resulted in 234 units that were finalized in 2025. So there's a bit of a lag time between the reporting year and the actual units that are reported if we're only looking at issued building permits. So, you know, a large number of units issued in a given year will generally result in a large number of units finalized in the following year. Likewise, the same is true for units applied. So if we look at the total number of units applied for in 2023, we see that there was 187, and there was a relatively low proportion of those that were issued in 2023. So 2023 had a large buildup of applied units, which is what resulted in a large number of units issued in 2024. Subsequently, a large number of units finalized in this past year, 2025. But because of that, it makes it seem like the number of units issued last year, only 65, is a reflection of markedly slower, and to be fair, there are slower market conditions, but a really meaningful drop in those units. And so it's worth noting that it's really a reflection of the fact that in 2024, we only had 80 units applied for. So you see, because we had so many fewer units applied during 2024, of course, during 2025, we wouldn't have a large volume of units to issue. So I hope that's clear enough. I just thought it was worth pointing out that this doesn't necessarily represent a major slowdown, although it does represent a continued slowdown that we were already seeing in total units sort of being applied for, issued, and subsequently finalized. And for what it's worth, you know, if we look at the total number of units applied for in 2025, that's 143, which is a significant uptick, almost double from the prior year. So the hope is that, you know, next year that will be reflected in the units issued. I know I've thrown out a lot of little data points there, and it can be a little bit confusing. Is there any questions about that in particular, or about any of the other maybe programs that I covered, or general RENA questions?
Did you have more for your presentation? And then, or we could jump into questions now if folks have clarifying
No, I think
questions.
now's a good time
Yeah.
to stop if you want to take
Okay.
an opportunity to ask any questions.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, any clarifying questions from the board to staff? Board Member Ruiz?
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the detailed explanation of the issued versus applied. At the same time, if we're keeping the same measuring principles, the same thing would happen the next year, and the next year, and the next year, because it's a running cycle. So whatever is applied, it will come forth next year,
Exactly.
right? So then we'll just have to wait and see what happens next year to see. A few questions. One, on page 4, on the Housing Authority, the first line item where it says project receives certificate of occupancy for 2 buildings totaling 109 units. Well, it says 82 units were 30% AMI and 25 units of 40, and 82 plus 25 is now 109. So,
Not all of the units would have been deed restricted to those levels of affordability, but what we
but
do,
these are, no, these are North Housing.
I agree that they're all deed restricted, but these were the specific levels that were reported to us. So when we asked them, hey, what were the specific levels, the ones that they wanted to say, yes, we should take credit for these because they are especially low affordability restrictions, that's what we received from them.
There were 2 managers' units.
Okay,
One in
so
each
I
building.
think it would be good to clarify that, because this report is going to the council, right? So that just add that plus 2 managers' units.
Got it.
So there's no confusion in here. And the same nomenclature is also repeated in page 9 as well. So let's just clarify that, so people won't say, wait a second, it doesn't add up.
Okay.
Okay. Second thing, on the same page, West Midway project, the progress is the developer submitted new applications for planning entitlements, et cetera. I thought we approved this.
It's related to the tentative map and construction, so it's likely that there are multiple entitlements related to the project. So we may
Okay.
have entitled, you know,
So there's more entitlements coming. Okay, thank you. And then moving down, Mariner Square, did they give us a timeline on when they're gonna submit for building permit?
not that I've seen.
Not that you've seen. Okay.
I've spoken with the developer a few times, and they're unable to find a financing partner.
Okay. That's what I was afraid of. Then there are a few projects that I have written down and, I was wondering if it applies to this last cycle or not. One is at South Shore. I know that the planners have met with the developers a few times. Was that this year? Was there movement last year? How do we measure that?
So the measurements, as far as we're concerned with the tables, are only for formal projects applied for. So unless we get a formal application from them, it won't go into this report.
Okay, so South Shore is out. And then how about Foundry? I know that we approved that a few years ago, and the developer was trying to pull building permit.
That's correct. We're currently working through a number of outstanding issues on that, but they do have a pending building permit application for the actual apartment building. They also recently worked through some of the public works permit issues that they had. So I believe their horizontal improvements associated with that should be either getting issued or close to it.
So do you think that should be included in this report?
It's been included in a previous year's report because it's included on the year that the application was received. So the building permits, once that's issued, that'll be included in the next report.
Oh, okay.
And subsequently, when it's finalized, again, it'll go into the report under that. But in 2025, there was no action on the application that allowed us to put any information into the
Okay,
report.
so this report only shows the items that have action, but not the holistic view of what's going on in the city.
It is primarily focused on things that had updates in 2025. So, the 2025 report, which looked at the 2024 calendar year, would have included, for example, the application for a building permit for RAP B, which is the Foundry. No progress was made on it in all of 2025. So until they move forward from the last time we reported on it, it's
But you said there's a pending building permit.
from 2024.
Oh, from 2024, not 20, got it, okay,
Yep.
thank you. And then Block 11 on Alameda Point, Site A, got an economic force majority extension as that big umbrella, right?
That's part of Site A, yeah.
That's part of Site A's extension. So when was that extended?
Oh, it's been over a year,
So it was not 2025,
no.
okay. And then how about Harbor Bay?
The Harbor Bay Business
Shop-
Park or the
yes,
shopping center?
The shopping center.
The shopping center was not a formal application. We received a preliminary
it.
application, yeah.
Well, doesn't preliminary application count, or is that under SB 330?
So they didn't formalize their application submission. They withdrew before formalizing a submission.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarifying information. Do we monitor how, on the rental stock, do we monitor the progress, the occupancy progress? Because I've heard that some developers are struggling to fill the moderate income units.
I think that is something we've heard as well, expressed by some of our developers and folks who are trying to lease out those units. We get information from Housing and Human Services on, the rental program, but I don't know that it includes specifically whether or not they've been having difficulty with, for example, moderate income units. I don't think it has that level of detail.
Okay, I think it would be worthwhile to start tracking that, just see how our program is working. And then the other question is, at the tables that was added at the end, because under the different permit type, I mean, ADU is obviously ADU. What does CB stand for?
I'm sorry, can you just,
What does, let's say, for example, page 16.
page 16. Thank you, sorry, I just wanted to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. Oh, are you maybe referring to
The page 16 of Exhibit 1.
okay, and what is your question about it?
Under different category, hang on a second. local jurisdiction tracking ID, there's an ADU, and then there's numbers attached to it. So I know that, okay, that's an ADU. I'm just looking at different type of permit. What does CB stand for?
Combined building?
Thank you. It would be helpful to have legends.
Sure, yeah. Those are, the tracking ID is just the
Yeah.
permit number, and that's.
Perfect.
yeah.
No, I get it. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, yeah.
And it'll be because, again, this report is going to the council. We want to make sure there's enough information for council to react to it.
Sounds like a good idea.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other clarifying questions? Board Member Hom?
Yeah, thank you for the report, and thank you for the report out. I actually appreciate that your table expanded, showing planning permits, building permits, occupancy level, because I know HCD only requires you to report, building permits issued, which I think you had a nice explanation on that. But it's good to see the whole kind of life of the projects that are going through. And I also realize that Alameda is not the only city that's not able to meet their numbers. If you look at the housing reports from other cities, it's similar. The economy is really impacting construction of residential units. Having said that, I would start with my last question first, as it relates. In Program 22, and the program is similar to what I see in other cities, but it basically something that HCD required, but it basically says that if you're not able to achieve your numbers or your program goals, the city is required to take a look at other possible solutions or adjustments to try to further meet those numbers. And I know the economy, hopefully HCD is sensitive to the fact that the economy is driving a lot of this. But have staff taken a look at maybe perhaps what are some program adjustments that could be made to try to facilitate the production of housing units, including the affordable units?
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate your question. And to your earlier point, we are far from alone as far as our RENA goals. Yes, so Program 22 does require that we compare the quantitative housing production goals, which is for each given program, we've sort of assigned a quantitative either number of units we expect to result from this program or number of households we expect to help or whatever it is, right? And so the idea is that if we're not meeting those quantified goals, that we reconsider whatever policies are affecting those and try to make it so that it's easier to build housing. Generally speaking, staff is very interested in looking at changes to the ordinance to be able to facilitate that or to staff level sort of decision-making. I think you'll find we have a number of potential ordinance amendments that may come before you as soon as this year to address some of those things, ranging from potentially allowing ADU condo conversion, short-term rental ordinances, changes to our inclusionary housing requirements. All of these things are intended to facilitate the production of housing and specifically lower income housing. And I think in addition to those, there's also sort of a real dedicated staff level push to say, hey, on housing projects, we're going to do what we can to get to yes and to leverage state law, to leverage streamlining, to find a way to make this work in a way that's going to also work for the community. So I think there's a combined sort of day-to-day, ad hoc, the way we receive projects. The intent is to try to facilitate that. And then in addition, we have a number of ordinance updates that we're hoping to bring before the board in the coming year to sort of improve that.
I think your report does mention some of those. I'm wondering for the benefit of the council, and primarily HCD, whether you might want to summarize a little bit more of that in your discussion under Program 22. Otherwise, they may think, city is just status quo,
Yeah. So maybe just calling out some of those particular
Yeah,
amendments
just,
that we're
or could
working
you
on.
reference, as mentioned previously, such and such? That might be helpful for HCD, because I think, as you know, HCD is getting a little bit more aggressive in reviewing these annual reports,
Yes,
or a
this
little bit
year.
more particular, I put it that way. Let's see, I have a question regarding Program 17, which has to do with providing funds for residential rehab, which I think is a wonderful solution for promoting affordable housing and long-term affordability. I was wondering, how large is this program? Like, how much funding has been allocated to assist for residential rehab?
If I'm not mistaken, that is from Housing and Human Services. I would need to get some more information from them to answer that properly. But presumably, if their only source of funding is the CDBG
Yeah.
funds.
And we don't know the CDBG allocation yet, right? I understand
Yeah.
it's still pending next
Yeah.
couple of weeks or
So
so.
there's some uncertainty there, I think.
Yeah, that
as
might
far
go
as
down.
Continued implementation, yeah, that could theoretically be in jeopardy.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know. I mean, I think that that's a really important program. So
agree.
I'm just curious how much funds we have available, and CDBG or other funds to help support housing rehab.
I'll also add that the city did apply for a soft story structural assessment grant. That was a federal grant. Or I think it plans to apply for that grant. And there's some litigation over that because it had some of the restrictive conditions, like in order to receive this grant, you have to cooperate with ICE and you have to eliminate all DEI programs and that type of thing. And so the city is actually in litigation over that issue.
Yeah. That's, first of all, great that you're applying for the grant. Very unfortunate those strings are attached to the grant, in my opinion. Okay, no, that's good to hear. And then, again, going backwards, on page 7, there's a discussion of ADU units and indicating that 52 have been produced, which is a good number. I think it's less than previous year, but then again, it's a reflection of the economy. But there's a discussion that there was a study done and additional 15 units or 15. I'm not quite understanding what that study was and what these 15 units mean. Is that on top of the 52? That it just wasn't clear to me, so I appreciate.
Yeah, that's a confusing section. When I was writing this, I knew it was going to get a question because it's almost impossible to explain it clearly, so bear with me here. ABAG, our Association of Bay Area Governments, produces, every few years they have produced a study that supports the idea that a certain percentage of ADUs constructed will sort of inherently be affordable to a certain extent. Their logic is derived a lot from the fact that, based on surveys they've done and things, that ADUs are often rented to family members or close friends, and often go for lower prices than other comparable units on the rental market. And so basically, they have all that information collected in such a way that it supports the idea that for all of the units issued for ADUs in a given year in a given jurisdiction, that those units are broken down by affordability into 30% very low, 30% low, 30% moderate, and then 10% above moderate incomes. So the 15 units that you're identifying there are the 15 units of those 52 that are not considered affordable. They're considered above moderate income. So it's not 15 in addition. It's of those, this percent is the total.
Okay,
So you've got,
okay, you got 52,
Yeah.
and 10% are considered above mod. So this 10%, that's just 5 units, so.
so sorry, I misread this here. It's 15% for the low, very low, and moderate, and then I believe it's, I
But
guess,
it's 30%.
7 for the remaining.
30%, 30,
yes,
and then
exactly.
10,
Each
right?
15 represents a 30%
Yeah, so I
allocation
just, oh, I see, okay, so
Right.
15 is 30% of the 52.
Of the total,
Oh,
exactly.
Okay, We're not quite, but
Yeah, more or
it's
less.
like 17 or something,
Yeah.
yeah, or something, yeah. Okay, all right, yeah, I wasn't clear to me what the explanation was in that paragraph. You might,
Yeah, those are not additional units. Those are a breakdown of the
yeah.
52, yeah.
You might want to clarify that paragraph, just in case there's some confusion by others other than myself.
Oh, I think there will be. Thank you.
And then my final question is, I know the inclusionary housing ordinance have gone through our commission, and I read that it went through the city council. I just kind of asking, what's the status of that ordinance currently?
As I understand it, the status of that ordinance is that it's still working its way through council. I don't believe we've had a first reading to, move forward on that. So I think we're still sort of in the study session / work out the details of that, the inclusionary.
The inclusionary, right. So the inclusionary is actually coming back to the board as well.
Okay.
Yeah, before it goes to council.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just wondering where it stood.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think we're aiming for April.
April, okay, all right. Thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member.
Thank you. Any other questions? Board Member Wang?
Speaking of timing of ordinances, could you, just because it's been a while, could you speak about anticipated timing for the short-term rental ordinance?
Yeah, I think, as I understand it, that will be coming before this board this year for a study session. Presumably, if that study session results in direction from the board to continue our work on that, we would revise based on your direction and bring it back with for a recommendation from you folks. As I understand it, there's been quite a bit of community interest in this issue. And so I think we're trying to tread very carefully as far as sort of broad sweeping either prohibitions or allowances. And so I think there's just nuances that need to be worked out. But as far as our intent, I believe our intent is to, in this year, bring it at the very least before the board and hopefully also to council.
Nothing more specific than that, because I think we last heard it in April, and the intent then was to come back in the fall of last year. So we're a bit beyond that.
Yeah, I think we've gotten a lot of community input since then, and are reckoning with just how precarious the issue can be. I think there's very strong opinions on both sides about it. And so whenever that happens, it does tend to slow our work as we consider the very valid concerns of both parties.
Okay, understood. That's helpful. Thank you. To your report on page 4, the very top of page 4, you have a bullet that's continued on from the prior page. Says streamlining housing production has been part of the work, one of the strategic projects of last year. I was hoping you might be able to expand on that a bit more.
I think I must have the wrong page numbers here. I'm so sorry. Is this under the programs?
Just above the programs, 2 bullet points that are hanging at the very top of page 4. No? Yeah?
It's under like house all Alamedians
Yeah.
and homelessness.
Yeah, I can clarify. These are council priorities adopted in their
Oh.
strategic plan. So this is how they prioritized sub elements of what are already in the housing element and general plan. So yes, streamlined housing production. It can mean lots of things. So
I was just hoping to hear more about that.
yeah. Well, I think the main thing is implementing state law, which has many more ministerial approval pathways, and sort of taking our, say, for instance, our density bonus process that's in our ordinance and kind of reconciling that with state density bonus processes and making that more straightforward. It's just in how we approach talking to people about it that, or objective design review standards and sort of helping people find the pathway, as Tristan said, to yes, where we say, okay, well, if you can show that you have 30% glazing, for instance, we can get you through this process, quicker. So just kind of in our day-to-day talking with people and looking at projects, we're trying to find ways to streamline.
Yeah, that's helpful. Last question, and then the rest I'll say for comments later. Your table of permits from last year, I noticed you had a column tracking tenure. And interestingly, a lot of rentals in the ADUs that we saw permitted. How do you track that? Can you talk a bit about that?
So HCD provides a guidance document when filling out these tables, because as I mentioned, every year they seem to add new rows and columns and
Okay.
ask for more granular information. And the instruction document specifically with regards to that column actually directs us to report rental for all ADUs. In part because the city has not adopted anything under the ADU condo conversion laws that the state passed. So because the state allows ADUs to be ownership units, I suspect that'll change going forward. But their current guidance is to report those as rental units.
Okay, so it's possibly a bit misleading then.
Uh,
It's not like you went out and you asked them, hey, is this ADU being rented?
It's not so much misleading because to own just the ADU is not currently possible, right? So you might be owner occupying the ADU, right?
Yeah.
Because you own the other unit. But if that housing unit is not being used by the owner of the primary dwelling unit, it's being rented or it's
Well,
vacant.
Well, I think this data jumped out at me because of our discussion around the short-term rental ordinance, not to digress too much, but there was a lot of discussion around how are these ADUs being used or how do they want to be used by their owners, right? And a lot of the feedback that we got was, well, I might want to rent it, but I might not. And so this data point jumped out at me because it says, hey, they're all being rented. So when I say maybe it's a little bit misleading, I'm saying, well, actually, we don't know if they're all being rented, right? Definitively.
It's not so much saying that they will be rented so much as what type of unit are they being offered as?
Yeah.
Because they can't really be offered as separate ownership units. They default to rental units. But I get your point that
Yeah.
is misleading.
Yeah, but it's helpful to understand what that R means, I guess. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Sahiba, you have questions?
Yeah, thanks again for the report. I just had two quick questions. One is there any sense of why the city didn't receive any SB 330 applications?
That's a great question. I think there's probably a lot of things that go into that. SB 330 has a pretty broad range of eligibility requirements, so I'm sure there's a pretty limited range of parcels in the city that are even eligible for that. And of those that are eligible for it, they are primarily sites that you would only really develop as a large housing developer. And a large housing developer in the current macroeconomic conditions is unlikely to have a pro forma that works out for that kind of a development, and so would probably not initiate the process with us at this time. That's just my sort of personal reasoning. I'm sure there's a multitude of reasons that kind of go into that.
Sure. Okay, and then I know it's just been 2 months into 2026, but any insight you can give us on what's happened in the last just couple months?
We are continuing to work with our larger housing developers to kind of gauge what their expectations are for 2026. So I think I mentioned for a couple of the projects, we got pretty favorable responses saying, yeah, we're going to continue at this clip. Alameda Marina Townhomes is a good example of that. And I think there are other projects for which, many of which have kind of already sort of slowed down a little bit, where we can kind of continue to expect that inertia will keep it slow. I'm not expecting a big housing boom next year, I guess is what I'll say. Hopefully better than this year.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. I guess sort of building off of that question, I was wondering, because the staff report mentioned something to the effect of I guess the city expects the same trends or pace of development to continue for the current period based off of last year's 8-year cycle. I guess I went ahead and answered my own question. I looked at HCD's website, and it looks like it's about, I don't know, 2,500 housing units were permitted in the last cycle. Is it safe to say the number in the report says 22%? Would it be like 22% of 2,500? Like maybe is a,
I would expect
Tracking.
that if we continued at our current pace, that we would come in probably just under that 2,500 for this cycle. Mind you, that's still far off the 5,300 that we have, allocated to us in this 8-year cycle.
yeah,
But we would need to increase the pace of production in order just to meet the amount that we had met in the previous cycle. Not by much, but we would need to increase our rate of production to meet that.
okay, yeah. Okay, that sounds aligned with what it says in the report. And sort of tied to what Board Member Hom was asking, are we technically in the mid-cycle? Is this year 4 of the?
The
Is
way
there
our
such-
housing element talks about it is a little bit inconsistent, actually. My hope is that we'll treat this sort of like year 4 as in the mid-year that we will be collecting the reporting on to assess the next year, right? So if, 2023 is your first year, it stands to reason that 2026, right? But you don't want to take the information from 2026 because that's actually looking at 2025. So that's why I think as far as when we talk about like the mid-cycle review specific to ADUs, I think we're looking at this year's numbers. I think it's worth noting, though, that we're kind of already beginning that process of mid-cycle review. That kind of goes to Board Member Hom's earlier question about, well, what is the city doing to address the fact that maybe it's not meeting some of these quantified objectives? And so we are sort of looking at these numbers and figuring out where the policies that we have work and where maybe they're causing developers to reduce their total unit counts or do other things that aren't meeting the goal of housing production. So yeah, for sure, we are considering those things. We'll probably treat this sort of as we may have some sort of beginning, mid-year things coming your way, but I think until we have the numbers from 2026, we won't be able to get a good mid-cycle assessment.
Okay, that's helpful. And then I had a couple clarifying questions. I guess the transit corridor housing mentioned in Program 3, I know it, like you just shared the answer with like, why don't we have more SB 330 projects? But these seem like particularly unique projects because they are smaller lots or smaller density. Like, would we do like advertising or something? Like, I wonder like how would we share that opportunity with the field, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of that happens sort of at a staff level on an ad hoc basis. We have a lot of conversations with prospective developers who come to us and say, hey, I'm looking at XYZ parcels. I think for this one, I might be able to use some transit corridor streamlining provisions from state law. And for this one, we don't think we can do that. And we say, well, actually, for that one, we think you can, and here's why. And so a lot of it's staff level saying, actually, we think this site's really great for what you're trying to do, or we think you might be able to better leverage that state law under these circumstances. So that's really the first point of contact we have with developers a lot of time. In fact, I have a question that I got today specifically about transit corridor redevelopment under SB 79. And so, we scheduled a meeting with them. And so tomorrow we'll follow up with them, say, here's our understanding of the requirements. The site that you've identified seems to be eligible. We'd like to move forward with you. Help us understand how we can help you meet the minimum required 30 units per acre density, how we can help you meet you want to get 5 stories out of that because that's the benefit you get out of using that state law. So it's really kind of a staff level conversation a lot of the time where we say to folks, we have some really great ideas for how you could leverage that. Let's work together and find a way that, this site works for you or this model is going to have a good home at, whatever location.
Yeah, okay, got it. That's helpful because it seems like there hasn't really been any activation there. So I was wondering about that. Great. And then there was like this theme in the report saying how you all were awaiting additional input from Housing and Human Services and I think another department. I'm just curious, like, what's the barrier with?
So we did get reporting on those. So I believe we uploaded an updated exhibit. If not, I can go over a couple of the quick changes. So for example, we got some information on our fair housing programs. Tenant protections, that was a big one that we got from Housing and Human Services. So for example, the city assisted 132 tenants through the Fair Housing Counseling Program. Gives a total number of inquiries, investigations, audits, and so on. And so I think the reason that took a little bit more time, one of our staff members in Housing and Human Services was out for a week when we were asking about the reporting, which I think probably contributed to the delay. But also, the information they provide is really granular, and I don't think that they report on it sort of periodically throughout the year like we do. Like when I'm preparing to get this report together, quarterly, I sit down and I run those numbers reports in our building permit system so that I can sort of get a quarter to or year to date sort of, and then do that multiple times throughout the year, and then I compile the numbers much more quickly as a result. Whereas the folks in those other departments are being asked, hey,
Ad
can you
hoc.
provide an entire year's worth of data? And so I think it just takes longer for them to come through. I'll take some responsibility for that as well. I definitely should have reached out a little bit earlier. In previous years, we had some admin staff who assisted planning with the annual progress reports, and they've retired, which is great for them. But it means that some of the timing was off on my part for requesting that information. We'll be requesting it early January from now on.
Okay, so that information will be available to the city council, though?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's helpful. And my last question, what was it? Oh, the report mentions this down payment assistance program. I'm just curious, like, what happened to that? Like,
Yeah, so that changed a little bit. This was news to me as well. Evidently, we are no longer assisting all first-time homebuyers with down payment assistance, but rather only those who qualify for affordable homes. So basically refocusing to
A subsidized affordable homeownership program.
exactly. And so it's not so much that there's no more program, it's just that the program is now more narrowly targeted to help the folks who are most vulnerable. So that's sort of the change there.
Yeah, yeah, and when it comes to updating our housing element in the mid-review, it makes sense to, yeah, have that reflected. Okay, those are all my questions. Sorry, that was a lot of questions. And with that, I think that's it, and we can go ahead and open it up for public comment. Oh, yes, yeah, Board Member Hahn.
Question, if I may. And yeah, you raised a question that kind of prompted a question in my mind regarding Program 3, the Commercial Transit Corridor. I was just wondering, I don't believe Alameda falls under it, but you know, the new state bill, the Wiener bill, I think is SB 95, that has raised the height limits around transit priority areas. Does any of Alameda areas fall under that legislation? I can't remember.
Yeah, so this was, and I think it's SB 79, although I could be
79,
mistaken.
yeah, right. Yeah.
And as I understand it, yes, there are some transit stops on Webster, specifically because they have the dedicated bus lane that do qualify for that. So anything within a half-mile radius of those transit stops would presumably be able to benefit from that new state law.
So that's kind of higher density is a more streamlined review. Right?
Yes, assuming you're actually required to meet the maximum residential density, so it'll be 30 units per acre for those, for anything within that proximity.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering.
Great, thank you. No other clarifying questions, then we could go ahead and open to public comment. Thank you so much to staff. And we have a speaker.
Yeah, that would be great. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Fantastic. Chairwoman Cisneros and Planning Board members, good evening. My name is Reverend Sophia DeWitt. I serve as Chief Program Officer at East Bay Housing Organizations. I'm also a resident here in the city of Alameda at 1580 Buena Vista Avenue, Apartment A. And I'm here tonight to just say that EBHO looks forward to continuing to work with the city of Alameda and you all as planning board members as you seek to meet the RENA goals in the housing element. We can see on the table that's on the screen that the city's made some good efforts, obviously, and the numbers that have been permitted so far are not reaching the levels in the RENA, are actually far below that. And that's not, unique to the city of Alameda, but it is a reminder to all of us that we need to continue to do everything that we can and just redouble our efforts to meet the housing needs of everyone in our community, particularly the lowest income folks. I do note that the very low income slice has the most permits so far, which is good, it's encouraging, but more work to be done, and we look forward to continuing to work with the planning board, the city council, and staff on meeting these needed goals. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your comment. Any other public comments?
We do have a public comment here. I'm going to unmute you now. Sean Murphy, if you'd like to speak.
Good evening, planning board members. John Murphy, Pacific Development, and also Alameda Marina. I'm here tonight to emphasize the importance of building new housing in Alameda. Alameda Master Plan, which was approved in 2019, consists of 801 housing units, which include both for sale townhomes and rental apartments. The last phase of this master plan was spoken about briefly during the annual report, which is the 260 unit apartment project called Foundry. It's truly the only shovel-ready project on the island today. We've been working really diligently with the entire team, city staff, and 2025 was very busy. While this project doesn't show up on the annual report, but 2025 was spent working with all of the agencies, including BCDC, all the departments of the city, planning, building, public works, and also the county, Department of Environmental Health. The Foundry project is truly shovel ready. We want to start construction this summer. Construction costs are exceedingly high. The continued tariffs and all other issues, including oil prices, make it very volatile. However, this team, which has built Launch, is ready to build the Foundry project, and we need to get started this summer. Any delay of this project would not be good for Alamedans. We clearly need to embrace every single mechanism that we can as an island so that more housing production can be built. This project will generate almost $10 million in total impact fees. So it is significant in every way. And we look forward to continuing to partner with the city so that not only this, but other projects, other housing projects can come forward in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your comment. Do we have any other public speakers?
If there are any other public speakers, please raise your hand. No further public comment.
Okay, great. Thank you. And with that, I'll bring it back to the board for deliberation and comments. Board Member Wayne?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the great work, the great discussion, and the great questions. First comment, I want to appreciate Board Member Ruiz's call out of the question on moderate income units. I do think we've made movement toward addressing this in the update to the inclusionary housing ordinance. But for existing moderate income units, my vote would be to, I guess I would want the city to advance a package to address the vacancy in existing units. I think the time, I think Board Member Ruiz, I think you called out a question around tracking vacancy. I think we've heard a lot of evidence and testimony to the fact that those units just don't move. So rather than tracking, I think it's time to move toward a solution to addressing the vacancy in the existing moderate income units. I want to talk about what the last speaker just spoke of, and a lot of the discussion is focused on. We have a paragraph on page 6 of the report, which I will read just as a sort of launching point for my comments here. The city is undergoing an extended recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, and the housing market is similarly finding its footing in the new marketplace of higher interest rates, continuing cost escalation, and uncertain rental and sales demand in light of immigration and employment realignment. Due to these conditions, the city is taking a long-term view of the 8-year housing goals. So I think it's really important that this paragraph isn't the last word on what we're doing here. It kind of reads to me as, there's a lot of stuff that's just outside of our control. And to be fair, there is. And we're in a long cycle, and hopefully we'll get there. We're, 3 years in now, and it doesn't feel to me like we're getting there. And so on one hand, even if we viewed the current situation as temporary, meaning we've been in a housing lull where multifamily projects in particular don't pencil, this, temporary situation, if we want to call it that, is still sitting on top of a years-long or decades-long shortfall in annual housing production. So even if we were to return to the status quo, we would be returning to a status quo which we already were calling a housing crisis, right? So I think we need to be doing more. So I've said in a couple recent hearings, we shouldn't be sitting here expecting construction costs to fall. Construction costs don't fall. And that's, it's not a critique of the hard work that's already gone into the housing element and general plan. We're at a place where we can recognize the tireless work of members of this board and staff on the housing element. And I want to push a little bit harder. I want to volunteer us, if my colleagues on the board agree, for more tireless work. And the question there is, how do we get the projects that have been zoned and approved actually built? So what I'm strongly advocating for from this department is pushing harder in partnership with the city manager, in partnership with other departments to find creative solutions to getting there. But I think the planning board does need staff to be the laboring oar on this. And, I appreciate the staff level blocking and tackling. I think that's really important. I think it's really reflective of a sort of how can we get there together attitude. But I do think we need something happening at policy level too, not just in day-to-day conversations. So Board Member Hahn pointed out that Alameda isn't the only city not hitting its RHNA goals. I think that's really important context. But it's not to say that that's where we leave it, right? And I think Board Member Hahn was also right to ask, the follow-up of, well, what have we been doing and working on to kind of move the needle on projects, to be clear, on projects that have been approved at planning level already. So I want to point out some things that other cities in the Bay Area are doing and that I'm sure staff is well aware of. If we were to do something similar to these things, I would expect them to come to planning board and to city council for discussion. So policy level going above, beyond kind of everyday staff level conversation. So San Jose has reduced taxes and fees for qualifying projects, including cutting their construction tax. In addition to that, in the special category of downtown office to residential conversion, those projects can forego 100% of their construction tax and 50% of their park impact fees. Oakland last year reduced their affordable housing impact fee to $0 a foot over a wide section of the city, explicitly to incentivize market rate development through fiscal year 27 to 28. Redwood City last year temporarily reduced affordable housing requirements by 25% through June of 27 in order to encourage the construction of residential pipeline projects. These last two examples are exactly the sort of temporary fee reduction that I advocated for in our discussion of the inclusionary housing ordinance. San Francisco has passed waivers of the transfer tax, inclusionary housing requirements, and impact fees in order to facilitate office to residential conversions downtown. They also just created a new financing district in order to support those types of projects. San Francisco is contemplating a reduction in transfer taxes overall to facilitate projects broadly. All of this is to say we have to be at the table too, and we have to be looking at the levers that we can pull. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Any follow-up comments? Board Member Hom?
Yeah, thank you. I echo much of what Board Member Wang is saying, you know. I know all cities are struggling with this. Many cities are trying to look at different solutions to how to promote housing. I mean, it's really a challenge, and I don't think, in my opinion, cities are to blame for this issue, but there are things we can do. I know financing is such a key element, and there are some of the examples that were brought up are good examples. I know in talking with developers with high impact fees, which are necessary to fund infrastructure, discussions of how those fees can possibly be phased, so they're not required to be paid up front, some phasing or temporary reductions of what some cities have done also in the interim period. Sometimes those help, but I also know that there are studies showing that even with zero impact fees, development is not proceeding forward, you know, so it's not just impact fees. But every little bit helps, so pursuing those temporary remedies might be a solution. The other item is there's limited, but there is financing available for housing, and the more perhaps city working with developers can collaborate to apply for some of the state funds, tax credit financing, you know, proactively pursue those projects. I know they're very competitive, but, you know, are there strategies where the city can get ahead of the curve a little bit and work with developers to apply for the housing? There's special financing districts that are being talked about. I don't know whether they're feasible here, but there's a lot of discussion of possible solutions. This all comes down to financing, in my opinion. You know, to me, doing the ordinance amendments will help. You know, streamlining development is all critical, but bottom line is financing. To the degree the city can adopt some temporary measures or pursue some partnerships with for-profit, nonprofits, you know, I think that could be helpful. But otherwise, I think the report is good. You know, I think it, in my opinion, meets what HCD is looking for. Just a little picky thing. Take a look at the page numbers. I think after page 9, I think the page numbers either get cut off or something, but that's just, I know you may have already caught that. But otherwise, thank you for this report.
Thank you, Board Member Hom. Any other comments or, yes, Board Member Luis?
Thank you, Board Member Hom and Board Member Wang for the thoughtful comments, and I just kind of want to express my summary, you know. I would recommend that we do a nexus study on our impact fees and compare to our neighboring jurisdictions. If I'm seeing it right, I think we average about $45,000 a unit, and Oakland's probably in the 30s. I don't know what San Leandro is. Unfortunately, in the capital market, for those who need to finance the project, Alameda gets lumped with Oakland. That's just the way things are. We can say all the special things we want, but Oakland right now is not seeing much development activity for its safety and other reasons. So we need to be able to evaluate that and see what that means. So I'll recommend that, that we do a study internally, see what we can do. I do recommend, I believe the action at the table is to recommend this going to the council. I would like to see the edits being added, such as a clarification on the housing authority building, so that numbers adds up. I would like to see the clarification, legend on what these mean, so that when the council is reading it, they can understand that. I understand some projects, this is just a snapshot on what's happening in 2025, but it doesn't, and that's probably how it has been done historically because it's an annual report. But it doesn't give a council an overview of all the pipelines and what if the project has been stalled in 2 years, it falls out of the radar. I recommend evaluating that, maybe provide a summary of these are our pipelines, but last year there's only activity of this much, and that's what we're highlighting. So we know there maybe we need to look into some stale projects, try to unjam what, if we truly believe as a city that we need to provide housing for our residents, which I think we do. Otherwise, we'll just be paying lip service.
Thank you, Board Member Deweese. Any other follow-up guidance or comments? No?
Can I just-
Oh, yes, Board Member Wang.
Just a quick one, because we talked about, I think the last time we heard the inclusionary housing ordinance, we talked about a nexus study too, which I think, by and large appreciate. So maybe this is a question, because I'm not super clear myself, but I sort of understand a nexus study to be about what can we as a city legally impose from a dollar perspective on a project. What nexus do we find, and how high can we get that number to be? What legal coverage do we have to get that number as high as we can go? To me, that's what a nexus study is. And then the thing that sometimes goes with a nexus study is the economic feasibility study, which will spit out a different number. Here's our nexus, we can charge this number, but here's a number at which projects are feasible, and that number may or may not be the same as the nexus study number. I think it's important that when we say we'd like to see a nexus study, that we're also clear that we want an economic feasibility study, because that's the thing that's very much on our mind right now.
Can I quickly react to, and I love for you to jump into, because we both served on the inclusionary zoning task force, and something that was made clear to us from staff and the consultant was that nothing is penciling right now, and a nexus study wouldn't make sense if we were to do a more comprehensive one. However, I do think something that maybe Board Member Deweese is suggesting is having a more narrow analysis of the impact fee component, and I wonder, Board Member Hom, if you heard the same thing, if that's something that could be helpful for us.
I think, your points are similar to what I was going to say. I think it's beneficial to, and I'm sure the consultant actually did this already, a comparison of what other impact fees are in other cities. That can provide maybe some policy direction, that if the city's fees are relatively higher than, say, some of the adjacent jurisdiction, maybe we look at a way of temporarily reducing them or finding some way to phase in the payment of the fees. But it's true, I'll say this, having done nexus studies in the past couple of years, is probably would be not beneficial for the city to spend the money to do a nexus study. Based on the results of the nexus studies in adjacent cities like Berkeley, San Leandro, I think Fremont, and I did one for San Mateo City, were so underwater as far as financial feasibility, the conclusion would basically be the same conclusion that Berkeley and other cities found. So we've been $30,000 to $50,000 for the same conclusion. So I'm not sure a nexus study at this point will be beneficial. I think it'll be beneficial when the economy improves, that you do a nexus study Because Nexus study is also only good for like 3 to 5 years because you have to reflect the current economic conditions. So they have a shelf life of more than 5 years. So I think a Nexus study is important to do. I think at this point, there's enough cities that have done Nexus studies and shown that we're so underwater that I don't think it would come with any different conclusions that's unique to Alameda versus other cities. But I do agree comparing the impact fees, what other cities are doing is definitely something worth doing, and then using that for policy discussion.
Yeah, because I do remember that being a big sticking point from our discussion, so. As were there many sticking points, but yeah. Did staff want to react to that any further, or did we capture it?
Yeah, I would just say, I think we agree with that conclusion that the Nexus study would get us a number, but it isn't a realistic number for what we could realistically expect housing developers to be able to afford, or that it would be productive. It can be counterproductive. So in that sense, we're really looking at the feasibility study, and even there, we kind of know what the answer is, more or less, not feasible at almost any level. So, but we are instead thinking about how to keep things more or less equivalent, and I think we've shown you some tables where we're trying to say, well, currently it's 15% at certain ratios. What could we do that might be a little less onerous for the developer, but still get us some affordable housing in each project? And I think that's the policy direction of our partners in Housing and Human Services and the Housing Authority, as well as it makes a lot of sense to still do the mixed income kind of inclusionary projects as much as possible. So that's kind of the policy direction that we've gotten.
Yeah, and I do think we're kind of leading into the workshop that we'll have hopefully soon, because I feel like we're getting like really eager to solve for that. But I'll just save this one thing and then maybe save it for a more robust discussion for a future hearing. But I do think the theme that I'm hearing is that we want to be as ambitious as possible as a city and do what we can to unstuck projects that are shovel ready. And so maybe that looks like, I remember both board member, all my fellow board members actually have like echoed where it's like, can we do something for like I don't want to call it like a carve out, but like a parallel process for some of these opportunities so we don't lose these potential homes. So I'll just lift that up as something for us to maybe dig into further when we have that inclusionary zoning ordinance discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And then going back to Board Member Luis's comments about wanting to see this report. I know that it sounds like y'all are on a pretty strict deadline in order to get this to HCD for the annual progress report review. Can you just say more a little bit about that and next steps?
Sure. So our intent is to revise this as noted, noting the manager units in the north, getting a legend in there for some of the sort of more confusing shorthand, correcting the page numbers, all that good stuff. We'll bring that corrected report to council next Tuesday. Assuming council doesn't take issue with the information therein, we will submit it to HCD probably prior to the April 1st deadline in the interest of getting it in there. And occasionally they have, there's a submission portal, and so you can have technical issues with getting the tables into that portal. And so I'd like to go a little bit before the deadline to be able to troubleshoot that. So probably the last week of March will be the sort of submission to HCD and LCI for what it's worth. It actually goes to both. And then it's done. I mean, we very rarely get comprehensive feedback from them about it. We might get something like your submission has been received.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Luis, I just want to make sure that process works for you, given your.
That's fine.
Okay, great. If no other comments, Yeah, I echo, this is a really great report, very helpful to see all the efforts we're putting into each of the identified programs and all the projects. The number is quite low for this year for a lot of reasons outside of our hands externally, but as we just talked about as a board, I think we're excited to see what we could do with these ordinance opportunities, whether that's the short-term rental one or the inclusionary zoning. What are some ways that we could get creative and see some movement? But again, just I want to echo thanks for the staff for all that you do, and hopefully we'll see some shifts.
Do we need a motion to, for recommend acceptance of the report?
I think so. So with that, does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and make the motion to accept the report with the revisions that was mentioned by Board Member Ruiz. I always would like to see staff take a look at, again, clarifying, I think it's program 17 regarding the how you explain. I understand what you're saying. It probably could be clarified a little bit. And then based on our group discussion here, it would be nice to, without a commitment, to expand the discussion of program 22 to discuss measures that the city might consider to further facilitate construction of housing during this cycle, whatever that might be. Could be consider this, or I know, we're not talking about having the council commit to any direction, but at least having that discussion in the annual report.
Thank you. And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have 2 absences, and the motion passes. Thank you. All right. With that, we'll go ahead and close agenda item 5A. Again, thank you to members of the public for participating. Have a good night. Staff communications?
Yes, under 6A, you have a report of recent decisions made by staff on your behalf for 3 projects, design review. They're currently in the appeal period, and you could call them for review if you have concerns. 6B, future public meetings. We will have a meeting in 2 weeks on the 23rd. We have 3 agenda items for you, so it'll be a meeting. We'll have discussion of the Radium Theater, the Hornet Museum, and the Encinal Terminal's temporary use permit.
Great, yes. Board Member Ruiz?
President Cisnero, I will be out of town that Monday.
Thank you for the, nope.
I will not be in town either.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. We may not have a quorum.
We'll do a survey.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you for the heads up. And you two will be in town. Okay. We'll follow up. Okay, thank you.
Defer to you guys.
Great. Moving on to agenda item, any public comment? Seeing none. Okay. Board communications? Okay. Moving on, any public comment? Okay. Non-agenda public comments. Anyone could speak for 3 minutes for something that wasn't on the agenda tonight? Seeing none. All right, we are adjourned. It's 8:24. Thank you.